So hello everybody, my name is Mohammedali, and I have a few questions. But before I get to that, allow me to tell you a little story. So sometime last year, I was volunteering with an organization here in Tanzania. And what we basically do is we gather medical health professionals along with equipment and medicine, and we go towards villages and medical facilities that are isolated and don't have access to such facilities. And so on a regular basis, these hospitals and facilities will see anywhere between 600 to 900 patients. Some facilities see that in a week, others see that in a day or two. So to have a little bit of extra help is really important. Now, I've been with this organization for a very long time, but every experience is completely different, completely unique. However, on this one particular site visit, I met with a 15-year-old boy called Hassan. Now, I first noticed Hassan when he was sitting at the back of this seemingly endless line. And he had cotton wool wrapped around his door, binded with like sellotape, and he was very quiet, didn't seem like he came with anybody. So naturally, he intrigued me. So I went up to him and struck up a conversation to try and see what was wrong. And so he showed me his foot, and it looked severed, and it was bleeding a lot. So I figured, okay, this seems like it needs immediate attention. So I take him to the front of the line. We go into a room with the doctor. She consults him and concludes that he requires immediate medical attention. So I take him back outside, talk to the local staff, explain to them the situation, and they tell me that he would have to travel to the hospital that's in the city. That's 2 hours away, so that's 4 hours round trip back and forth because they didn't have electricity in the area. Now, they have a generator on site, but they don't prefer to use it because, well, fuel is expensive. And also, it pollutes a lot, and so the people who live nearby don't prefer it. So, as I went back to Hassan to try and explain the situation to him, he tells me a few things, which, in all honesty, sometimes I genuinely wish I could forget. So he first mentions that he's a 15-year-old boy, only child, to a 17-year-old single mother. Now, what this basically means is, as a 15-year-old, he basically has to feed his family. He has to feed him and his mom at just 15 years old. The other thing he tells me is he wouldn't be able to afford the trip back and forth to the city hospital. And even if he could, he wouldn't because he can't leave his elderly mother alone for that long. And so I found this to be a very interesting problem. And in my personal experience, when I noticed such a problem, I realized that it doesn't affect just one person, but rather it's communal. And so I decided to try and find out what the root cause was. So I went around to talk to the villagers and to try and understand the situation better. And it seemed as though all everyone ever mentioned was electricity. So I had someone tell me if I had electricity, I would probably sleep better at night with my children because I can turn on the fan. Another person told me if I had electricity, I'd be able to sell more things by buying a fridge. Another person told me if I had electricity, I'd be able to increase my harvest by buying more equipment. And so the more I probed, the more it seemed as though electricity would fix so many things for these villages. And so I asked myself, why is this the case? You see, the solution seemed fairly simple. All we needed was electricity. Is it really that difficult? And so as I embarked on my journey to try and answer these questions, I came across a few findings that I would like to share with you all. So firstly, the energy grid in Tanzania is mainly composed of natural gas, petrol, hydropower, and solar and wind. And so if you take a look at the graph, you'll notice that majority is made up of non-renewable sources of energy, which is polluting, and which contributes to climate change and global warming. So that in itself is the first red flag. The second red flag is we face a lot of strain on our energy grids. What this basically means is we're consuming more energy and electricity than we produce. But so if you think about that for a second, the situation in Hassan's village, as unfortunate as it sounds, kind of makes sense, right? Because it doesn't make sense for us to increase the strain on the electric grid and then produce more power. Because we haven't fixed this issue yet. But so I thought to myself, perhaps there's a better way to do this. There has to be a better way to do this. And so, in my journey to try and find a solution, I had to ask myself a few questions. So if I was to come up with a solution, it would first of all have to be reliable, it would have to be low cost, and it would have to be long term. So the first thing that came into my mind was solar powered electric grids. And this makes absolute sense to me because it's easy to set up, it's easy to install, very low maintenance. In villages you have plenty of space, so you can power the entire village and nobody would even notice that the panels are there. As a matter of fact, and this is perhaps bit of a bold claim, but I generally believe that with a decent amount of space, we could probably power the entire city of Dar es Salaam through just solar. But that's a different conversation. So, and to add to that, we live in an African country, so sunshine hours is not an issue. And also, it's renewable. So it seemed as though it was just plus point after plus point after plus point. So I decided to pursue it further. I ran the numbers, and I'll spare you of that because it's a bit boring, but if you take a look at this graph, if it shows up. So as you see, the yellow graph is your bill currently as it is. If you notice the x-axis, you see as the years go on, your bill increases, and that's by default, it's meant to happen. There are a lot of factors that are involved here, which we cannot control. But if you see the new electric bill, that's your bill after you install solar. Now, you'll notice two things. First of all, it is significantly lower than your current energy bill. Secondly, it's fairly constant. The reason this is like that is because the variables that are then involved after you purchase a solar power system are completely in your hands. You basically become an independent power producer. That's the technical term for it. You're in control of your own energy. If you see the blue line which states solar payments, that's basically how long it will take you to save enough money to repay for the amount you put into the solar system. At this point, I figured this is a great solution. I had everything in place. I could finally go to Hassan and tell him he'd never face a situation like that ever again. Or so I thought. You see, implementing such solutions at scale is extremely difficult, and it's a very long journey. From advocacy to raising awareness to funding, legalities, all the way to implementation, it's a very long journey and it's extremely difficult. But in my personal experience, I've never found change to be easy. I found change to be difficult, I found change to be extremely time-consuming. But most importantly, I found change to be necessary. And so I told myself, I have to do this. But even after all that, I still have a lot of doubts in my mind. I have a lot of questions that are still unanswered, such as, I started wondering if I'm looking at this in the right way. Have I perhaps missed something? Maybe I'm overlooking a solution. Is this even a challenge that can be fixed? Or am I just being overly optimistic at this point? Now, all this, just in an effort to try and help Hassani and villages like his. You see, I've met a lot of Hassani. I've met them at villages, I've met them at orphanages, I've met them at schools, I've met them at hospitals. But there's one characteristic about every Hassani that I've ever met that stands out. And that's if they had even one chance, no matter how difficult and how tasking it may be, to help a single Mohsin, they would do it in the blink of an eye. And so that begs the question, why shouldn't we? If I didn't already have a reason to do the best that I can to protect our planet, I most definitely had a very long list after I met all my sons. You see, it may seem dire at this point, but mankind still has a lot to offer. We still have a very long way to go, and I personally think that we need to be doing our best so we are able to experience that future and to build a future in which we can actually live in. Not just for us, but for everybody else who is yet to come. It is our responsibility. You see, when I ask the question, how are we going to power our world? I would like to answer that question by saying that it involves help from everybody. Whether it's turning off that light bulb in your house, even though you may think it doesn't make a huge difference, it does. If you're a business owner thinking about renewable solutions in regards to energy or technologies that increase energy efficiency, if you're a household owner thinking about maybe solar-powered water heating, solar-powered water pumps, even if, it seems as though the misconception is we think that we have to be maybe engineers or entrepreneurs to make a difference, but the truth is, this is an issue that cross-cuts across so many different industries and it affects everybody. It doesn't matter if you're an architect, if you're in finance, if you're in healthcare, it doesn't matter what your job description is. You have a huge part to play in this. And so when I ask myself, how are we going to power the world? I genuinely believe that we can. If we all came together and worked on the same solution to try and secure a future for us on this planet, because we have to. Not just for us, but for the planet and for everybody that's living on it. Thank you.